Well, good afternoon. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and welcome to a special edition of Business as Usual. We are joining our Winning the Talent War series with our Business as Usual today. The topics that we're going to talk about today are absolutely relevant to the work that each and every one of us do. And we thought, what better way to do that by reaching our audience at noon. So thank you for joining us. So if you've never participated in Winning the Talent War, these sessions are designed to help our companies adopt best practices in a number of human resource areas, including recruiting, professional development, compensation, employee engagement. And importantly, we realize that the region's companies need to work together to help grow our region and to power the collective success of the region's tech sector. It's never been more important than it is right now. So typically we end at 12:30. Today we're going to end at 12:45. We'll allow for some time. We're going to listen to some information. We will have presentations. We will have time for questions as we do allow for most of our business as usual exchanges. But I want to lay this up today, and so that you understand not only who we're having a chance to speak to, but also some of the companies that have supported us and continue to support us as we do this work. And I cannot thank them enough. So we're very excited to be hosting Nabil Sousou, VP of Global Business Development at Denison Consulting. He's here with us from Michigan. I love this virtual world. And he actually said it was way too sunny, so he was inside and joining us from his home office. And then our longtime friend and partner, Michael Couch, president of Michael Couch Associates, they're both gonna talk about how important it is to focus on organizational culture and particularly what it means during this extended crisis. So before I get started and I bring them on, I want to give shout outs and deep appreciation to the companies that have supported us and support us for this series. And the first is CGI. If you don't know CGI, you really should. They have a huge presence here in Pittsburgh and around the Great Lakes region. They were founded in 1976, and they're one of the world's largest IT and business consulting services firms in the world. They are global. They have an active presence here in the region, as I mentioned, also around the world. So thank you, CGI, for your partnership with us. And we will share their website so that everyone can take a look and link to them. Synergy Staffing, long friends of the Tech Council. They're a leading information technology recruiting firm located in Pittsburgh and work really hard for local companies to actually drive their talent issues. So attraction as well as doing some recruitment is really their sweet spot. So they are active and they're busy. So if you want to know about them, we'll put a link out for Synergy Staffing, and I want to thank them. And also there's My Benefit Advisor. That My Benefit Advisor guides all employees of all sizes through planning, communicating, and managing employee benefits. Employee benefits matter today just as they did pre-COVID. And if not, even more so. So thank you for all the sponsors. And then our business as usual sponsor, Huntington Bank, who have been with us right from the onset back in mid-March as we started to launch this series. So a couple of things. This is meant to be somewhat interactive. We will get presentations from both of our guests, and we will have a chat session. So we have muted you just so we can be considerate of our guests and we can have an opportunity to hopefully have not a lot of noise that each and every one of us certainly have in our background. But I want to make sure that this is an opportunity not for you to sell your wares as well. So just ask us questions. This isn't a time for sales. This is a time to engage on some meaningful stuff that really affects all of us that are leading companies and working in organizations. So I am going to now be quiet and I am going to introduce Michael and Nabil, and I am going to jump in and ask Nabil questions. So if we want to bring Nabil to the forefront. And I think Michael Couch is also trying to share a PowerPoint.
Yep.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Nabil, let's start with you. I understand that you recently completed a global survey of how employees felt about their company's responses to COVID. All right, that's big, that's bad, and we really want to hear what that means. So that's Welcome, Nabil. Thank you for joining us
Thank you.
again, and let's start talking.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Audrey, and I want to thank Pittsburgh Technology Council for hosting us. Uh, Basically, I mean, we're all experiencing the crisis. We're all adjusting. We're all balancing work-life balance. But to go back to what you originally said, Audrey, yes, we are still conducting what we call the resilience survey to help organizations and clients and prospective clients through these difficult times. So the title of the presentation, In a Crisis, Organizational Culture Matters. Bouncing forward requires a strong aligned culture. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to talk a little bit about Denison, where we came from, the origins of the company, and my consulting partner, Michael Couch, is going to take us through the findings of the resilience survey that we conducted the beginning of April through May. We're still conducting it, and we're getting more and more insightful information from the clients that have utilized the survey. So thank you. Briefly, Denison Consulting is a boutique consulting firm focused on organizational culture and leadership development, founded in 1998 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're still in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Our European offices are in Zurich. We have expertise in culture change and leadership development. We work with a global consulting network of certified consultants in over 50 countries. This is a very academic and research-based organization, this being in Ann Arbor. And again, focused on culture change, transformations, and leadership development. I myself came from a technology background, telecommunications, data communications, and security. I joined Denison in May 2008, celebrated 12 years a couple of months ago. Next, thank you. Again, our mission is very simple, to boost the performance of organizations by improving their organizational culture and leadership. Just to give you a framework of what we do, we have our own assessments, and I know the Pittsburgh Technology Councils did deploy our survey, and some of the other organizations maybe on the call have. So we have an organizational culture assessment, and we have a leadership 360 full multi-rater, and we have supplementary modules to augment the standard 48-item surveys to help organizations with specific areas of interest, whether it is diversity and inclusion, risk management, safety management. But just to let you know, the assessments are built on the same model that Dr. Denison created in the 80s after 2 decades of research. If we go to the model, Michael. And basically what Dan was doing is the qualitative and quantitative research to identify what differentiates successful organizations from others. So his focus was to how to identify what links organizational culture with business performance metrics. And again, the model continues to be valid to date. It's behavioral, it's business language. So what Dan identified is there are 4 key questions that every organization addresses to ensure not only sustainability, but profitability. First one is the mission. So do we know where we're going? The purpose, the long-term purpose of the organization. Are we listening to the marketplace? We call that the adaptability. Are our people aligned and engaged and capable? And last, do we have the values and the processes in place? We call that the consistency trait. In the middle of that model, we have what we call the beliefs and the assumptions. What the Denison, and we all have our beliefs and assumptions about our organization, co-workers, customers, the marketplace. What the model and the survey helps is allow us to surface those underlying beliefs and assumptions by measuring the behaviors that they produce. Each of those traits is broken into 3 indices, and each of these indices describes behaviors associated with the trait in a business language. No psychological interpretation needed. Next one, please, Michael. As we all know, in all organizations, we continuously have what we call the tug of war, or we call them the dynamic tensions between the different directions that our business is going through. So when you look at the top part of the model, we call that the externally focused, the mission and the adaptability. The bottom part is the internally focused, the involvement and the consistency. And we have to have a balance. We cannot be totally externally focused without having the processes, without having capable skills to deliver. And the same thing when we look at the model, if you look at the left side of the model, we call that the flexible organizations that are focused on customer focus, creative, new products and services. And on the right side, the stable model of the mission and the consistency. And this ongoing dynamic tension also, we see it often when we have our mission and our involvement traits. We see leaders setting realistic goals and objectives, communicating effectively to their employees, the buy-in from their employees. And at the same time, we see it between the adaptability and the consistency. Do we overpromise the client? We don't have the processes or the systems in place. So we have to be cognizant those tensions. We're living them day to day, month to month, irrespective whether it's COVID-19 or not. Thank you, Michael. I would share with you 3 studies we've done with organizations worldwide that have deployed the organizational culture survey, and to show you the correlationships we've seen between different performance metrics. This is a summary slide of 127 publicly traded organizations that took the culture survey over a 10-year band. And since they're public, we didn't need to query them on their business results, but you see the correlationships between the organizations that had more color in their profile, strong aligned cultures, comparing their corresponding business results with the bottom 25% of those organizations that scored in the lowest quadrant percentile-wise on the survey. Please keep in mind, as Brian shared earlier with you, all culture survey results are represented against a global benchmark that is robust, representative across industries, regions, and for-profit or not-for-profit. So if I'm the CFO of this organization, I'd be very interested to look at the sales growth, to look at the return on assets. And this is one available research study. So the higher the scores, the better performance. The second one I'll share with you is a private equity firm we've been working with now for almost 5, maybe 7 years. And they make sure that each and every portfolio company in their portfolio does take the culture survey annually, or depending on their size, sometimes a little bit more, 16 or 18 months. And this is the representation of the results on 2019, looking at the top 30 companies compared to the bottom 30 companies. Now, please keep in mind, like any physical exam, the culture survey does not transform the organization. It's what we do with the results. Where do we prioritize? Where do we drive the changes and the interventions to attain the business objectives? But as you could see, the corresponding results, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, private equity firms are only interested in 3 things: EBITDA, EBITDA, EBITDA. And this shows truly what happened with those organizations that took the culture surveys, but really did not prioritize and drive the actions necessary to rectify. And some of those were sold or the management was changed. But this highlights, again, the importance and the correlationship between strong aligned cultures and business performance. The last one I would share with you is a study we did with 338 Cadillac distributors. We were doing the culture survey on each of those distributors. Another organization was doing the culture satisfaction surveys for those clients from those different distributors. And voila, we got together and we looked at the results. And this is very insightful too. What we found out is the distributors that had above 80% highly satisfied customers had stronger, more color, more aligned cultural results, comparing them with the less than 50% highly satisfied distributors. Now, as we all know, a satisfied client is a great client to keep because the cost of new client is a lot more expensive. So I just wanted to share with you those studies, and they're all available, publicly published. Thank you, Michael. So the topic of our conversation today is the COVID resilience study that we did with over 40 organizations worldwide, and it's still ongoing, and we're still collecting valuable insights to help these organizations that took the survey to find out how did they do during this crisis, how did their employees feel, what are some of the insights to help these organizations ongoing, not only being responsive, but also planning and adapting for the future. The survey is at no charge. And again, variety of industries from different countries, from Saudi Arabia, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, and the US, and with over 4,000 respondents today. And what Michael is going to share with you, the first results are from the surveys conducted between April the 1st and May 15th. And again, lots more to come. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Nabil. So Michael Couch.
Yes, Audrey. Thank you. Thanks, Audrey, and thanks, Nabil. You and I have been working together for a while, but every time I hear you speak, I learn something new from all the experience you've had globally with this area. So I'm going to dive into the more details around the Organization Resilience Survey. But first of all, what do we mean by organizational resilience? And we're stealing this information from our client and colleague, or our colleague, Richard Citron, who is an expert in resilience, wrote a book called The Resilience Advantage. But this is how we define organizational resilience: the ability to effectively prepare for, navigate successfully in real time, challenging and adverse situations so that we can meet or exceed expectations. The way Richard likes to say it, it's not only the ability to bounce back from a challenge or from a crisis, but also to bounce forward. So this is the culture survey results, the circumplex as we call it, for those companies that have so far participated in the resilience survey. So you can see this sample is organizations who are already pretty much leading the charge in culture. Many of them have done the survey, so they've been working on it. So you can see that leading organizations already had a culture in place that could help them make a difference. They had clear and aligned cultures. So these organizations were able to be prepared to take action, to remain resilient through the current crisis, and be prepared for the future. So we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. The results here we'll see from organizations who are already doing pretty well. As the study grows and we have more participation, we'll be able to see where some of the bigger differences might be. So there were 10 questions, a simple short survey, and that were asked for the organizations that were participating. And the stem for the question was, during the COVID-19 crisis, and then these were the 10 questions that people were able to respond to. So you can see deals with policies and practices during this time, tools and technology, plus a number of things about how we taken care of you and how do you think our organization is doing. So we can take a look at the favorable responses and the range of responses that we've got from these organizations on these 10 questions. Beyond these 10 qualitative questions, we also ask a couple open-ended questions that really can help parse out and more deeply understand what we're learning about organizations' resilience and their response during COVID. And we'll go into those also in a few minutes. So here's the results. As you can see, for this sample of already leading organizations, quite positive. You know, with the observations from these from their employees that they feel like they know policies and practices for working now. They had the tools and technologies they needed to work effectively, no matter where they were. They understood the goals and priorities right now. And you can see some of the other results. Where we started seeing a little bit of a difference was with the two areas. You can see that I believe my voice is being heard by leadership in our organization, and we are coordinating effectively across different parts of the organization. Now, if you think about it, that's probably not too much of a surprise given the change, but the more positive, the questions with a more positive response, you can also see are sort of the top-down things that organizations can do to build resilience and respond to a crisis. The two areas about believing my voice is being heard and working effectively across different parts, yeah, that's more bottom up or cross-functional kinds of things that organizations need to do that may be a little bit tougher now, given the way that we're working. You can also see that in terms of understanding key priorities and managing work-life balance was okay, but when we got into the written questions, we found a little bit more information that can help us understand the things that all of us could be doing better or sustaining our resilience through a crisis. Now, the intriguing thing is there are a number of organizations, as Nabil mentioned, that also had done the organizational culture survey previously. So the R&D guys at Denison were able to take a look and be able to see what we can dig out of the data that can help us understand more the relationship between culture and handling a crisis and resilience. So this looks, first of all, at the top resilience scores versus the bottom 3 resilience scores for organizations that had completed the Denison Culture Survey as well as the resilience survey. So you can see one differentiator is that those organizations whose employees perceive them as being more resilient already had a very clear and aligned culture dimension around mission, dealing with strategic direction, having a clear purpose with goals and objectives, and also having a clear direction or vision for their organization. So what we're understanding, given the fact that culture is a leading indicator of future performance, to be resilient in the future means focusing on building mission and as part of your culture today. We look at consistency then, that's a second cultural dimension that Nabil mentioned. And so we find that also this is a differentiator. If you have a core set of values, if you are effective at achieving agreement and at coordinating and integrating across your organization prior to any challenge or disruption or business model change, you can be more resilient. And you notice there's a slight, for you data nerds out there who are looking at the numbers, you can notice there's a slight lower rating on resilience here on consistency. So we can ask a question, what might that be? And we'll actually get an answer to some of that when we dive into the comments. The third area is involvement. Same thing, a differentiator. Having commitment, ownership, responsibility, investing in talent, and building a team orientation is a great way to help you vaccinate your organization against any challenges. It improves your, with having everybody involved and connected is a great way to make sure you're ready to adapt if needed. And finally, adaptability, also a differentiator. This is the external focus that I really like in the Denison culture model. It doesn't exist in many other approaches to culture, but the idea being that you can adapt if you focus externally on the marketplace, on customers, and learn from that and change. If you have that capability, you can be resilient as well. So that's a quick overview of the survey results and what we know now, comparing the resilience survey results to the culture survey results. Now, I mentioned there were two text questions, or open-ended questions, I should say. So the R&D folks also did some natural language processing around two questions. During the crisis, what are the things that our organization has done well? And then second, what could the organization have done better or could be doing better currently during the crisis? And here's where we can learn a little bit more. The other thing is that the other thing that we found, these organizations, their employees feel they're doing well. They're being communicated to effectively. They saw a significant percentage of the people feel like they're really focused on the protection required and being able to work from home and prioritizing health and safety were quite positive. And the things that most organizations are trying to do or do well, and it's making a difference from their employees' perception. So that's what organizations have done well. We can learn a little bit more than by understanding what organizations could do better or could improve on moving forward. And here's where we saw the interesting thing about that. Remember the one survey question where the employees felt that they were not being heard, or they felt like their voice was not being heard. And a lot of it had to do with, do you really understand what it's like for me working how I'm working now? And the challenges that I'm facing with 5 kids, 2 dogs, at home here with me. And so a great place to think about better understanding. We had one client who went through the process. They immediately created an action team around better understanding the challenges of their 20,000 employees in terms of work-life balance. I think the interesting thing is one of the things we could do better is continue to do what you're doing. That was great to hear for the participating organizations. But the other piece then was around facilitating consistent and effective communication. In the comments, this was more around that coordination across, understanding across and lateral communications, not so much top down. But also, thank you for telling me what's going on and letting us know what's happening, but what's coming next? So the idea of understanding and being able to, once we can figure it out, or being transparent about what we know or don't know would be a beneficial activity right now. And then there was a feeling about some of the comments related to hazard pay. Maybe given the way things are changing and the way things are going, we need to look at our compensation and incentive systems. So those were some of the top things, and also continue to help me be safe. Now that we're opening up, we see some employees' comments saying, listen, I have to go visit customers now. I have to go out and be with people. What can you do to help me make sure I'm safe there? So those are some of the key things. So those are some of the details around the survey and around the comments on the survey. I guess I'll pause here and Jonathan, see if there's any questions. Or
I'm gonna jump in. Jonathan is muted, and
thank you.
Let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, thanks. We have a question here that this material, you can allow us to have this material posted? Will we be able to share it?
Sure.
Okay. And then have any government entities use some form of the resilience survey to understand citizen culture and resiliency?
Nabil?
No. The resilience survey was deployed by government organizations internally, but not externally to citizens. No, not yet.
Okay, and so while you rolled all these organizations up together, are there any market sectors that you can see any differences in terms of patterns, in terms of the data that you've extracted and used?
Very good question. And as we shared with you, this is still ongoing. Right now, we have about maybe 45. Earlier on, most of the organizations that took the lead on taking the survey were small, medium size in the States. Mm-hmm. As we started getting more uptick, so I can share with you, we just deployed it with Bridgestone Asia Pacific tire manufacturing for 8,000 employees. So they were not in the benchmark yet. Those results are not showing here, but the diversity of the organizations, manufacturing, not-for-profit, fintech, but not sufficient yet. And I think what Michael was sharing with you earlier, it's still ongoing, and hopefully we will get a little bit more diversity in the organizations.
Okay.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in the data too is it's probably not so much a market segment or an industry segment, but it is the currently existing culture of the organization that has a bigger impact or creates more variability in the results than what kind of business or where you might be located initially.
I think one of the things, just from my role, is that I would say I've seen a lot of companies were successful in doing a rapid pivot, right?
Yep.
In terms of, moving quickly and trying to stabilize the workforce. But then with the United States, I wonder, with the amount of unemployment that we've seen, what do you think that, how that data sort of impacts in terms of the data set?
Yeah, and Nabil, if I could refer back to, so there is a part of the Denison research that looked at more community and business development in communities that had organizations that had clear and aligned cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So we did find, and I think there's more opportunity to look into this, that the more clear and aligned, higher performing cultures a community has, the better overall economic performance. So the only thought it brings to mind is, given that, it probably depends a lot on the business you're in at that point, but it's a great way to help organizations and communities be resilient against challenges that might come up globally or locally.
Right. So clarity on strategy and
Yep.
and mission.
Yep, that's a key component of
Right.
culture.
And so I have another question out here. Were any of the organizations that were surveyed, Nabil, were they in higher ed?
There was EDU, not higher education. There was an organization in Oklahoma called KTC that provides training, but not higher education. It's not universities that took us upon it. But again, this is still ongoing, and hopefully we will start seeing that. To go back to one of the questions I was asked earlier, we had significant number of organizations that also wanted to do it later on, because again, they were dealing with furloughs and they were dealing with, so I think in the next month or so, we will probably have more participation on the organizations that just restarted, and to see how they dealt with the immediacy of the crisis and how they're continuously responding.
Right. And so, okay, we have another question, which is I was thinking of as well, and this is from Sean Ward. He's saying, as the gig economy continues to expand and companies rely more on contractors, which we've seen, and part-time employees who are increasingly mobile, right? So you have all these different factors in here. Who do you build a common organizational culture with? And if I can just piggyback, the trend from working from home or remote work or flexible work, however you want to say that, paired with contractors, shrink and swell capabilities for companies, building culture is tricky, particularly as you bring in new people into that environment. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you've got to be seeing that in both of your work.
Yeah, and I would share with you all, I would refer you to an article in the New York Times Magazine section, Sunday, June the 9th, that addressed all these. What were interesting findings? Productivity went up like a hockey stick.
Right.
Work-life balance, well-being, stress. But interesting to talk about culture, because again, we're talking about behaviors. So the assumption here is, how do we behave when we're not physically in one place? And that requires a lot more effort and a lot more focus on the values, on how people interact. And again, we're all getting used to the virtual world. And most important you brought up is contractors, new employees coming on board. So one other statistics, and I will share with you all the article.
Mhm.
In 2018, 5% of the workforce was working virtually. The projection was in 3 years, we'll go up to 15.
Mhm.
According to Accenture, 50% of us who are employed today are working virtually.
Right. We had that wrong.
So, and again, it's going to require, and it's going to require Michael Couch, Denison, leaders in different organizations to instill those values, those behaviors in the organization, new members, onboarding them. How do we onboard new employees? And how do we bring them together as part of the family so we do have that aligned, clear, engaged employees together in the mission of the organization? It's going to require significant effort, and don't estimate the role of the leadership.
Yeah, that was what I was going to jump on there, Nabil. We have a client participating in the culture that has numerous small locations, but they've been very successful at building and sustaining a clear and aligned culture over time. So they're almost all already virtual just because of the way that their business is set up, but they work hard at it. And the understanding on the other side is what kind of leader behavior it reflects the beliefs and assumptions that drive an organization from their strategy is a great discussion, making sure that organizations spend time defining and translating their strategy and what they want in their culture to the key knowledge, skill, and ability of their leaders. So one of the first places many cultures start, many organizations start on their culture change journey is leadership development.
And, you know, it's a new kind of leadership. I mean,
Yes.
I can feel it in my own small organization. It's a new kind of leadership that is absolutely intentional. It is has a shorter time frame to execution, and it's an amount of vulnerability that I think, because in one of your findings that you shared, people feel like we're taking care of people when they come to work and taking the right precautions in the workplace. I think that's scored pretty high, but yet the inverse is also true, that understanding the personal blend of work and life and the 24/7 kind of accommodations are not as high.
Yeah.
So we do a good job at the stuff that's tied to brick and mortar, and a less of a good job when it comes to now this new world of virtual being. And that
the response on resilience was employees feel that the organizations are taking care of them as they're working remotely. So that is a positive. But yes, I think it's tougher. The other thing is, what's it going to be like, and how long is it going to feel like I'm being taken care of? Yeah, is right on. So understanding what we can do to really reinforce and sustain and it's probably now more of a work-life integration than it is a work-life balance, and helping employees do that.
Well, I think Richard said it better than I was able to articulate it. No shocker to those who know Richard. He's saying it's interesting employees view that their employers are not concerned about their well-being, as this will be an essential element in getting people back to work. So he's saying, back into the physical environment. How are employers responding to that piece? And that's sort of what I was trying to get at in my question, but not as eloquent.
Yeah. So the culture factors of aligning mission with involvement is a great place to start and think about, because it's not just any kind of taking care of. It's specifically to the kind of support that your work creates and your organization business model creates. So it's a great place to pay attention to. Sure.
So just back to Nabil real quick, since you shared some predictions a moment ago, right? You talked about what we thought work was going to look like. And then, wow, look at a 45% difference in terms of actuality. In the tech community, we see at the macro, sort of the global tech community, companies like Twitter and Shopify are saying you no longer need to be in the office.
No.
And
Yep.
got
Yep.
Microsoft and Google in Seattle and in the West Coast saying, well, don't worry about coming into the office until January. You know, we'll see what life is like then. And then you're hearing at Facebook saying, we're going to make sure that half of our workforce is remote and they can live anywhere. You know, and that's what they're plotting towards moving forward. We see that, you know, on the smaller as a subset of those examples. What are you predicting? What's your prediction based on that data that you just shared?
Well, I'd like to go back to what Michael quoted from Richard Citron, which is bouncing forward. I mean, let's be all thankful for the internet. What would we have done if we didn't have internet?
I know, we talk about that, yes.
Okay, so when we look at the impact of COVID-19 on digitalization, the impact is tremendous. I mean, thank God I could not function if my internet access did not work from home. So what are the tools, what are the new skill sets that are gonna allow some of us who can work virtually? Manufacturing cannot work virtually, but they do have to digitize, they do have to introduce more robotics, they do have to transform themselves. So I think it's not only the high-tech industries, but I think even retail right now, we look at some of our clients in retail that had to furlough everybody, close stores. Now, they were late in the omni-channel implementations, digitizing and everything. I think the ongoing challenges is we're not going back to what was. And how are we able to adapt to continue to attract the right skill sets to ensure that we have agreement, we're engaging our employees, and we're all rowing together in the same direction. It's going to require, I think we're going through right now what I would call kind of reaction still. I think some of the leaders or some of the organizations that are taking deep thinking about how do we restructure, how do we refocus. Let's keep in mind, Google, Facebook, they all did support virtual work for many years. And then they pushed back, they pulled back. So right now, I think you're still seeing reactions. Real estate people are scared right now. Commercial real estate is going to be widely available. So the transformations we're going through right now are going to require out of the box, creative, but yet still the concern, the compassion, the empathy, the support, the new leadership skill sets and competencies.
Right.
And if I would jump in on that too, the one other thing that we learned from the survey is it's going to be a challenge to maintain a focus on customers now too. So a new approach, a new thinking, new technology to really stay close and linked to our client base will be important.
Okay, well, listen, it is 12:45. We are very punctual here. I know that in your last slide, you've got the resiliency surveying extended. And so you're asking for more participation, I would imagine. And any other information we will make sure is available. I cannot thank you both for talking about a topic that is complex and yet has a lot of clarity. So I can't thank you enough. Everyone be part of the story. There's a survey opportunity, as you can see here. And I really want to appreciate all the sponsors that we've had for today, which include CGI, Synergy Staffing, and my benefit advisor, along with Huntington Bank, who's been with us along the way. This is the beginning of many conversations. I cannot thank you all for joining us, and we will have this recorded. It will be available, and you'll know how to reach both of the people who presented today. So thank you, Nabil. Thank you, Michael. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate this content. It's timely, it's important, and we're back here tomorrow at the same time. So thanks everyone.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you.
Thank you to the sponsors. And most important, please contact Michael, and I will make sure also that Michael forwards the New York Times June the 9th article about virtual work.
Stuff.